Hello and welcome to Creating for Grace. Today we are going to really focus on sponging technique. This is the finished card that we're going to be creating. It's actually a trifold and it's an easel card, so it will actually stand up kind of like a screen. The main focus is going to be the sponging technique. But for this, I used a decorative label punch and centered it on each of my panels. This is in craft. Then I did a layer of black, a layer of white, another layer of white, which is what we're going to be sponging, on the top. For the border around the top, I did the new triple punch. And it looks like this. There's actually an inlet that would hold ribbon. There's a scallop that creates this decorative edge. And there's also one that has these little teardrops notched out to make a fancy kind of edge on your card. So that's what we used for that. The colors we're using for sponging is Old Olive, Bermuda Bay, and then I always start with a base, usually of crumb cake, which kind of gives it an antique look. Used both sizes of our butterfly punch and some pearls in the middle. This happens to be some vellum from the smaller bitty butterfly. And the two stamp sets that we used are both from the Celebration right now, but you can actually use any current stamp set. I used the Flowering Fields from Stampin'Up. This is part of their Celebration right now, 2016. And that's the flowers that are on here. And then I also used What I Love. So it says Know What I Love, and then on the end panel it says You. So those are the two stamp sets we used. But like I said, I really wanted to focus on the sponging technique. It's one of those things that's really, really forgiving in a lot of ways, but in some ways it's really not forgiving. And so wanted to kind of talk about how to make that work. And just have a paper towel here, and this is one of the biggest things that I think is important. Starting with the crumb cake, which is not as wet, so you really don't have to dab off, but a lot of times if you'll have like a piece of paper underneath you or something, you can dab off. And then the other thing that really helps is starting off the edge of your paper. And like I said, with the crumb cake, it's not as wet. And we're going to go in circular motion. So one of the things you don't want to do is ink up and drag. And that's where you end up with the lines. So you really kind of start off your paper and you work your way onto the edge. And the crumb cake is really what kind of gives it an antique look. And so there are a lot of projects you can leave like this to do it on a very vanilla paper or something like that. And I don't know if you can see, I wanted to leave the finished project here because you're going to see this really happens in stages. And one of the things to remember is you can always go back and add more ink, but you can't take it away. And kind of once you've made a major boo-boo on your project, you pretty much have to start over or just try and layer some colors over it. So the crumb cake's a really light color, very forgiving. You'll see when we get more to the Bermuda Bay where it's really wet, that's where you have to be more careful. Okay, so there's my 3 panels with just the crumb cake. It's not going to be a really big difference, but it does show through underneath with a little bit of a tan tone, which is really what I want. Then the next layer I'm going to do is the Old Olive. This is also an old style of my pad, so not as wet, but you'll still see if I go direct to paper, those are the lines that we end up with. This is what we don't want to do. And so even just inking, you can see this is much darker than that tan was. And so I'm choosing areas where my leaves are, I want really the flowers to end up with the Bermuda Bay, the leaves to end up with the green, and then just some real accent colors around. And so if I'm going to ink up with Old Olive, and this is my panel here, I'm really wanting to do some green on this side here. I'm wanting to add in some green really in the middle. And we're doing some towards the bottom. And so this is just your first layer, and that's one of the things to remember about sponging. It really happens in layers. You're not trying to deepen and darken the whole color right away. And so that is the second panel. And that's the third panel. And that is just with our layers of green. So you can see the difference in the depth of color here. So now we're going to go on to Bermuda Bay. And this is the one that is the foam pad that's really wet. And so you'll see I really keep a paper towel or a piece of paper next to me so that I can see how much ink that we have. And again, really important to start off the paper. Use a light touch for this because you're going to want to bring in some depth where the flower is. We're doing some in this corner, and then we're bringing some in from the side here to add a little. And that's just adding just a little bit. Again, testing on your paper, which is key, key, key. It's almost like Stampin' Up. So you've got your two flowers that are here, and we're going to bring some color in from this corner. Because we're keeping in mind that these panels are also together. And so we're bringing in some blue where there's green, some blue at the top here. We've got some of the Bermuda Bay here and some in the corner. So this is what we have so far, and this is just your basic sponging. What I did when I did this is I went back because I wanted to highlight. I did not want to color in all the leaves. I really wanted it to be a softer effect, and also the sponging is much quicker than doing all of the individual coloring. And so I went back and deepened the color with the Old Olive where the leaves were. And that is this one right here. And again, with the ink, dab, and then you can really see I'm going to go back and I have dabbed it off so it's not going to make those streaks on my paper, and I'm just using a swirling technique. So that just deepens where that green is for the leaves, and that's really what we want. So we're going to do the same thing on this leaf. Last one, where we're just deepening the color right where we have the green. And that's just going to make it stand out much more. So there's those three. Now we're back to the Bermuda. Remember, this is the really, really inky one. So this is the one we really want to be careful with because we want it to be visible, like so, in the flower that you're darkening. And that's basically going to be inking. You're going to rub that off, and then you're going to go pretty much only where your flowers are. And deepen that Bermuda Bay. One more on this panel. So you've still got the other colors, but what we didn't end up with was any streaks like this or really deep, deep dark spots. That's what you're wanting to avoid. So pretty much the sponging's done, which is nice. I have a panel ready to go here. All the dimensions will be on my blog, and so really easy to cut and do everything that you need. The center panel has no accessories on it, so we are going to use the Stampin' Up! Snail adhesive, and we're going to center that right there. The final panel, yeah, you can see where I had done my first stamping and did not get my pressure even, so you can see what I do. I flip the paper over and use the other side. There's that. We have our butterfly ready to go, and we have our glue dots that are here. And so we're just going to stick him about here. And then this is the one that has the ribbon, and I wrapped it around a couple times just for ease. So I find it easier to put some adhesive down around your card, and that kind of holds the ribbon in place. And I happen to have a non-stick mat under me, but if you had regular paper, you could go ahead and stick it right onto your project at this point and then tie the bow on there. I find it easy to like this. You might have a buddy with you. My daughter is at school right now, so I don't have a little buddy to help me. So I try and use my thumb to hold the end of the bow down. And so we've got him. We're going to cut off